Will Iran be able to spend this the way it wants? What are your thoughts on this prisoner swap deal?
Good morning, Maria, and thank you for having me again on your program. Last time around, we saw what happened to the money that was released to the Iranian regime under the Obama administration. Certainly, it did not end up serving the interests of the Iranian people. It went to further finance the regime's proxies in Syria and Lebanon. And I don't think this time it's going to be any different. It's interesting that the authorities in Iran talk about the Islamic Republic's prerogative to spend the money. They don't mention the people of Iran, of course. The principle of paying money for ransom should be wrong to begin with. And when you incentivize a regime that it pays to take hostages, and oh, by the way, the cost for each hostage has dramatically increased. God knows if next time they get a hostage, how many more billions will have to be assessed for it. And why not release all the hostages and only a few? So many questions are risen as a result, and I think the bottom line is that it does not end up being something that would be in the interest of the Iranian people. It's going to only yet again help the regime continue maintaining itself in power. And what's dramatic is that all of this is happening on the anniversary of Mahsa's death last year, and it could be very deflating for the Iranian people to see that the leading country in the world and its administration are willing to actually slap them in the face and reward hostage takers to begin with.
So many people have remarked about this that President Biden agreed to this on September 11th, agreeing to open up this money flow to arguably what many people say is the largest sponsor of terrorism. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely, and that's the reason why so many freedom-fighting Iranians wonder that if there are assets that are frozen as a result of further sanctions, let's say if tomorrow the IRGC is placed on the terrorist list and more assets, that ultimately, let's not forget, this is the money, the people of Iran's money, and they could in fact repurpose such frozen assets towards supporting the Iranian people if there is a policy of the maximum support, and for instance support labor strikes in Iran. If you talk about humanitarian aid, do it directly. Why give it to a regime that is murdering its people in Iran and continuing its raising havoc in the region and beyond?
Where is the rest of the world on this? Are they still doing business on the black market on oil? I mean, OPEC said this week they're expecting demand for oil to remain elevated, predicting next year global demand to rise by 2.25 million barrels a day. They're also saying that they're demanding that demand will surpass pre-COVID-19 levels. What are your expectations in terms of demand, and how much Iranian oil is being sold right now on the black market?
Most of our experts would say that even at its maximum output, and assuming that they can sell it all, is there enough revenue to sustain the economic situation that Iranians are today facing, where close to 60% of Iran's society lives at or under the poverty line.
Wow.
Despite that revenue, how are we going to be able to keep the country going and at the same time maintain yourself, continue your enrichment program, and so on and so forth? There's not enough for everything. And the question, therefore, is what is the priority? The regime is going to pump enough oil to finance its own survival. They don't care about the Iranian people and the starvation and the economic drastic decline that Iran has had ever since this regime has taken over.
Iran's president issued a strong warning to protesters ahead of these planned demonstrations, which mark the anniversary of the arrest of Mahsa Amini. She died after being detained by the nation's so-called morality police. Raisi said that we know what will happen to those who create instability in the country. Wow. Crown Prince, your reaction?
Intimidation is a typical tactic of totalitarian regimes that try to scare its own citizenry from any hope for change or bringing fundamental change. And that's what we are fighting for. Iranians are today standing in solidarity inside Iran, in the four corners of our country and across the globe. I anticipate that on the anniversary of Mahsa's death, which is September 16th, we will probably witness the most unprecedented solidarity of people inside and outside Iran. The regime will, of course, try to intimidate. They will probably try to crack down. They have already arrested or called Mahsa's family and other political activists as a means to further scare them. But in this world of social media, in this world where the world is tuned in, they can witness that Iranians will prove once and again how much solidarity they have against this tyrannical regime. I hope that these events will not just be a marking an anniversary, but it will lead us to the next phase of struggle. And I think one point that is very important for me to make, Maria, is that, of course, Iranians are united, but we need the world to also be united with us. We want governments and their politicians, irrespective of which side of the aisle they stand, to have multi-partisan, or in this country, bipartisan support when it comes to Iran. We're talking about human rights, we're talking about self-determination, democracy, we're talking about secular values, and I'm glad that the U.S. Congress, at least, has already taken some steps in that direction. The Mahsa Act has been approved. I hope it will pass Senate as well. These are very important at a time that maybe one wing of your government is not so helpful, but at least the legislation is doing its part.
Well said, Crown Prince. We stand with freedom and pray for those women. We appreciate you joining us today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you again.